You're watching Newsline, an RMI TV production. A street count next month hopes to measure the numbers of homeless people on Melbourne streets in a way the National Census never could. Bronwyn Larger reports on the plan to help find Melbourne's hidden population.
Meet Aaron Wade and his dog Levi. Aaron left home in his teens.
My family were going through some problems and I decided to leave.
Over the next few years, Aaron was homeless, living on the streets of Melbourne, doing what he could to get by.
Yeah, there was a lot of stuff that was frowned upon, yeah.
These days, however, he's got his life back on track and has grand plans for the future.
Hopefully be the best youth worker Melbourne's got, yeah.
Unfortunately, it is not known how many others continue to struggle as Aaron once did. But that's about to change. On June 2nd, Melbourne City Council will perform Street Count 2008, where volunteers will trawl the city streets to count those sleeping rough.
According to a statement from the City of Melbourne, the Council is conducting Street Count 2008 to get a more accurate picture of homelessness. It says knowing the real number of homeless people in Melbourne will aid in the Council's work with government and other organisations to end homelessness.
Those providing homeless services warn that census figures don't give a true idea of the numbers of homeless.
It's very hard to get people who are sleeping rough to participate in things like census.
And she's eager for Street Count to get underway.
It's exciting because it's benchmarking street homelessness in the city, and we really haven't had that before.
Street Count is also anticipated by Steve Person, CEO of the Big Issue magazine, which supports the homeless and long-term unemployed.
I think they'll find that the problem's been swept under the carpet for a long time. I think they'll find that there's a whole group of young people who are on the street that haven't been identified.
And while Steve Person idealises the end of homelessness,
there should be no homelessness.
Sherry Brunhart believes there can never be an end.
I don't think we can eliminate homelessness because homelessness happens when families break down.
Street Count 2008 will most benefit people like Jim, who led a very hand-to-mouth existence for many years.
Just bumming around the streets, going through rubbish bins, looking for cigarette butts and a bit of food and God knows what.
And although Jim may no longer be homeless, Sherry Brunhart is apprehensive about just what Street Count will reveal.
I think it's going to be quite shocking what we find, and I think that we should be shocked and we should be really appalled.
Bronwyn Larger, Newsline.
Now for a look at Today in Finance, here's Bree Roberts.
Thanks, Michael. The Australian share market opened lower today after sharp declines in base metals prices and falls in gold and oil weighed on resource stocks. A tumble in the share price of Newcrest Mining, Australia's biggest gold producer, led the market down. Around the region, in Japan, stocks advanced, pairing this month's decline, as a drop in oil prices reduced concern that higher energy costs will dampen profits and cut spending. The market slipped back in Hong Kong. For the third day running, Wall Street rose, with a forecast of faster profit growth sparking a rally in financial shares and tumbling oil prices that boosted the earnings prospects for companies that rely on consumer spending. In London, the market was directionless and slipped back marginally, but there was more optimism in Bonn and Paris for a second day as investors speculated higher oil prices will boost earnings at energy companies. To commodities. Crude oil is slipping back after last week's flurry that sent it to record levels. The concern of speculators is that it is so expensive people would cut back on their fuel purchases. Gold tumbled the most in almost 6 weeks as the dollar rallied. The fall was around 3%. On foreign currency markets, the Australian dollar slipped against the US dollar that's climbed almost 1% on speculation of an inflation-curbing interest rate rise in the US. The Aussie dollar is also down against other major currencies. And that's today's Newsline Finance Report. Michael.
Thanks, Bree. The hybrid car technology is an attempt to reduce carbon emissions from cars and trucks, but the high price tag is scaring away buyers. It runs on a combination of a petrol engine and an electric motor. The Rudd government has committed $500 million to a green car fund that could possibly convince Toyota to produce hybrid cars in Australia. But experts agree the fund should offer a tax rebate or financial incentive to encourage more to look past the price and to consider the environmental benefits of these low-emission cars. Last year, only 7,000 hybrid cars were sold in Australia. Now for a look at Today in Sport, Here's Simon Shirelli.
Thanks, Michael. Former world number 1 Leighton Hewitt is through to the third round of the French Open after defeating American Marty Fish in straight sets. The 25th seed, Hewitt took over 2 hours to win 6-4, 6-3, 6-2 and book a matchup with Spaniard David Ferrer. Casey Dell'Acqua is the only Australian left in the women's draw after overcoming local hero Natalie Deshi 6-4, 6-2. Australian Matthew Goggin has shown flashes of brilliance to charge to the first round lead at the Memorial Tournament in Ohio. Goggin reeled off 8 birdies in a stellar 70 under par 65 to lead Americans Kenny Perry and Jerry Kelly by 1 stroke. The talented Tasmanian took just 22 putts on the ultra-quick and smooth greens at Muirfield Village. Other Aussies, Rod Pamplin continued his good form to shoot 67, while Jeff Ogilvy and Robert Allenby carded 69. FIFA President Sepp Blatter says Australia is unlikely to host the 2018 World Cup despite receiving support from world champions Italy. Blatter says Europe will most likely host the tournament because the next 2 World Cups will be held in the Southern Hemisphere. A crowd of over 50,000 is expected at Dockland Stadium tonight when Melbourne Victory play host to Italian giants Juventus in a friendly match. Geelong ruckman Brett Ottens is set to return from injury and play his first game of the season against Carlton tomorrow. And Essendon coach Matthew Nice has pledged to attack at all costs in tonight's crucial match against Adelaide at Football Park, rushing key forward Scott Lucas back into the final 22. AFL players have often had to suffer in silence with injuries long after their careers have ended. But in recent years, the AFL Players Association has put measures in place to ensure the game's fallen warriors are not forgotten, as Mario Hanna reports.
Former Geelong player Jason Snell is still hampered by the injury that ended his promising career at just 23 years of age in 2001. His ankle was crushed in a marking contest against Melbourne at the MCG and he never played again.
I landed and his foot landed on mine and I fell, so basically just snapped it.
After several surgical procedures, he had the joint fused and was told he could never run or play football again.
It got to the stage where, I couldn't walk from my couch to the bedroom to go to sleep.
He now manages a recruiting firm called Final Five and joins the growing list of past players currently suffering hardship through injury, with the AFLPA receiving dozens of requests for help each year. Under the guidance of CEO Brendan Gale, the AFLPA has introduced a number of benefit schemes providing medical support and funds to past players who've had their lives after football affected by injury.
In the past, back in the 70s, 80s even, there wasn't this type of support and now finally there is. But I guess through this Past Play program we can actually give back to those who weren't probably as fortunate as current day players are.
Former North Melbourne great John Law is one player who didn't receive adequate support when he retired in the late 80s, despite the obvious punishment his body took.
I broke my arm in my 200th game, so that's about as straight as a dog's hind leg at the moment. I've knocked the tip off my elbow and broke some knuckles, had an arthroscope on my knee, and I'll probably be fronting up for some hip replacements.
But player-manager Liam Pickering believes current-day players will not have to suffer the same fate.
I think the welfare of the AFLPA has gone in leaps and bounds in the last sort of 7 or 8 years. The benefits for players now, once they retire, and whilst they're playing as well, is enormous.
In a show of unanimous support for the AFL's new stance, the game's elite players donated a portion of their match fees from the recent Dream Team game to the Past Players Fund.
Now with Laylaw, former Carlton captain Lance Whitnall may well need that support after his degenerative knee condition forced him into an early retirement at the end of last season.
It was only two seasons ago that I was best and fairest and things were going well, but yeah, the knee just sort of packed up pretty quickly and just got worse every game, so I'm still only 28, so as I said before, I was still expecting to play for a bit longer.
Mario Hanna, Newsline.
And that's what's happening in the wide world of sport today. Michael.
Thanks, Simon. Coming up after the break, we'll take a look at your weekend weather.